Two friends, Alan Dale and Jerry Carew, who grew up just a few streets apart in St. John's East End, have been separated by Canada's geography for 3 decades. They came together virtually during the pandemic to chat about like-minded interests. Alan lives in PEI and Jerry in Newfoundland. Thriving in remoteness has been a common theme for both of them during the pandemic. Gale Force wins. The podcast is the result.
And welcome to yet another episode of Gale Force Wins. I'm Alan Dale. With me, as always, my good buddy from the East End of St. John's, Jerry Carew. How are you, Jerry?
Alan, I'm doing well. I'll touch on the weather. Not that anyone really cares, but here in St. John's today, we're getting up to about 28 degrees. What I'm really interested in is the conversation we're going to have today. This is one that I've been anticipating and waiting for quite a while. Bev Moore-Davis is a very, very good friend of mine. And her story is one, actually, I'm getting chills just mentioning the fact that we're talking to her, because she's had such a challenging time, and she's inspired in terms of her entrepreneurship, her leadership, her advocacy, all of those things. Again, a very good friend of mine. This is not going to be easy, but I think her story needs to be told, and Gale Force wins. This is part of the reason we created it, Alan. Bev is one of those people.
100%, Jerry, and absolutely. Gale Force Wins is about celebrating success and people that are survivors, that are resilient. They've shown strength, they overcome obstacles, and they go on to do great things. On that note, Bev, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Bev Moore-Davis, and I'm from St. John's. I was born in central Newfoundland and adopted and raised in Georgetown. And for those that are not familiar with the community, it's a small little community about an hour outside of St. John's. I lived there. At 17 years of age, I became pregnant and ran away from home. Fast forward, at age 30, I made the gutsy decision to quit my job and go back to school and study psychology. About a year later, I met my now husband. And as you said in your intro, we both are business people. We've been very involved in the business community for a number of years. And about 10 to 11 years ago, I met a gentleman for coffee, and it changed my life. We both have been abused as children. And neither one of us had really disclosed the abuse. And during that conversation, I learned a lot. This young man was focused on how the abuse had affected him as a child. And I watched and listened and realized that we, as survivors of childhood abuse, we keep these secrets inside for years and really decades. And there's more damage trying to suppress that trauma than we even realize. As survivors of child abuse, we struggle with anxiety, depression, PTSD, nightmares, eating disorders, addictions, major self-esteem issues, and the list goes on. We're more susceptible to diabetes, cardiovascular disease, autoimmune conditions, specific types of cancers. And we struggle with all of this while silently protecting the perpetrators. And that realization had a profound effect on me. So I went home and told my husband that I no longer wanted to be afraid of these people that abused me, which were the people that adopted me, that I was going to be brave and I was going to be strong and I was going to start talking. And I started talking. And I spent the next 10 years advocating. I organized the Miles for Smiles Foundation, in which we support adult survivors. We have group meetings every month for survivors of any types of child abuse. We raise awareness. We've adapted April being Child Abuse Prevention Month and do a host of activities during the month. And I teach sexual abuse prevention. And I also worked on a memoir that I just released in April. And up until then, well, even before I started talking 10 years ago, and Jerry, you can attest to this, I've always been a very, very private person. And when I came out 10 years ago and started talking about child abuse, it's incredible how few people knew what had happened. I ran away from home, so obviously people knew that there was something that had happened in my home. However, they didn't know to the extreme or the extent. And, for the 10 years I've talked about child abuse, but more generically speaking than personally, of course. But since my book come out in April, it's shifted, the attention has shifted, and now it's personal. So, I'm talking about myself, and that's been a little bit of a challenge, but, because again, all these secrets that I've had my whole life are out there. But there it is. That's in a nutshell who I am and how I got here.
Bev, I just go back a step there and talk about when you decided that you were going to start talking. What did that feel like? Was that, you must have felt like you were on the edge of a cliff waiting to take that step off. How did you feel in the moment?
It was a big move, but at that point in my life, I had been struggling with an autoimmune condition, and I felt like I did a really good job of hiding what I had endured and what I was going through. Decades later, I still have nightmares. So, that's just to attest to how child abuse will, it affects years later. I mean, it's a lifetime. When I made the decision, I'd been struggling with my health condition, and I realized that I needed to somehow try and start dealing with this. I'm now a grown woman. I'm not a young girl anymore. And, the hardest part for me was in letting people know that I was abused. It was hard, it was hard to acknowledge that. And I guess most specifically sexual abuse, that's such a hard one to even wrap your head around. And, my peers didn't know anything about this. So it was a really hard decision. I started by speaking to my husband's family first. And from there, I spoke to my closest circle of friends because I wanted them to know and to hear it from me. It was challenging, but, I seem to always, I'm that person who tends to put themselves out there in regards to challenges. I don't generally back down from challenges. So I did it.
And Bev, how was the reception when you started to talk about it? How were people receiving the information?
Supportive. Everybody was supportive. It was a wonderful feeling to I needed it at that point, and it was there.
It's kind of like that. Go ahead.
Sorry, Alan. I believe I was one of the people you spoke to very early on. I'll never forget you come into my office when I had an office at the Village Mall, and you told me, I got to tell you, I was astounded with the story you told, because it didn't seem to fit in terms of what I would have expected in terms of someone who has outwardly you have it all together, a model, an entrepreneur. And I tell you, I walked away from that meeting struggling with it all. But I was certainly obviously very supportive, but I still struggle with a friend who's gone through this, and anyway, I just wanted you to know, I've probably told you that many times, but that day when I went home and I told my wife what you told me, I still remember that day as if it was yesterday,
I remember that, Jerry.
Yeah. So Bev, you start to express what happened to you. How does the journey then take? Where do you go next? How do you get this story out there? And are you planning it out, or are you letting it unfold as it goes?
I'm strategic in that I generally have to have a plan. So I started by telling my closest circle first. And the more we talked about it, I realized that I had to keep going, and I had the support, which of course gave me strength. I also started writing, and I'd always wanted to do something because I felt that I knew survivors, and I felt that I was one of the lucky ones, and that, as like Jerry describes, I have it together. But I basically I felt that I was able to handle this in a, I guess, more of a positive light. I had my daughter young. I didn't take some of the paths that I could certainly have taken at that point. Being a young mom, I was so determined to be a good mom that I made good decisions. And that was kind of like just so important to me that it kept me on that good path. But so I started writing, and in writing, my nightmares became more frequent. I lost my appetite. I would feel a heaviness in my chest. All these things are going on. And I'm not really paying a lot of attention to it. I'm just focused on my writing. And when I get enough done, I reach out to a friend of mine who's in the publishing industry, and I wanted her to read and give me some feedback. And she read it, and her advice was, people want to hear this. This is a really important story. But also, I want you to seek counseling, because it's going to be a challenging road as you write. You're going to continue to basically relive things as I write them. And she was absolutely right. So I started, I went on to see my doctor, and I kept writing, and all these things were going on. And at some point, my husband looked at what I had wrote. He started reading. And at this point, my daughter, who's now an adult, she's able to deal with these things. So I tell her a little bit about it. And, they're horrified. And I can't even, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? I can't be objective, because it's my story and it's my life, and I just don't see it from their eyes. But we realized it was very, very horrific. So the decision was made to talk to social workers from my past to try and help them so that they could learn from my experience. And then I also made the painful decision to talk to the police. Not because I wanted charges laid, because I never felt that I wanted I never wanted anybody to pay or to spend time in jail. It was never about anything like that. It was accountability. And I feel that there was a lot of damage done to myself and to other foster children who had spent time in their care. And I just felt that accountability was so important. So I went through the painful process of disclosing to the police officer. Because nobody was in immediate danger, it was one of those cases that was kind of put on the back burner. I spent several years poking and prodding at investigators and pushing the investigation along. And in the end, there was no charges laid. But my voice has gotten stronger through the process. And in releasing my book, that was very hard again, because now I've taken it to another level to be able to release my most intimate details to the world. But I feel like I'm ready for it on some level. And then there's days I feel like this is crazy. But I think, and I guess all the messages that I'm getting from people, that it's helping other people. So that's what I focus on. And that's what keeps me going.
When did you notice that your voice was gaining strength? You talk about your voice, you started to get strength. When did you notice that? Or was it just so gradual that it just happened?
It was a gradual process, but I began talking. And what I noticed in the beginning is that I couldn't get through without crying. I'd become so emotional. And I'm sure, Jerry, when you and I talked at your office, excuse me, you probably got some of that. Excuse me. So, but over time, I was able to get up on a stage or a platform or speak to a group of women or wherever I was. And I'd be emotional, but I didn't cry. And at some point, my daughter starts saying to me, "Mom, how do you do it? You're so confident when you speak." And this is like maybe 5 years later, but it happened. And I think the support that I've gotten from my circle of friends and my husband's family has been absolutely incredible. All of this has helped me. And when people reach out and talk to me about their own abuse, or they want to hear, just some advice from me, that all of that has, continues to motivate me to keep doing what I'm doing.
Bev, on that note, one of my worries, and I think I may have shared with you, was when you go public and you actually write a book, is the number of people that would reach out to you. I mean, the book has done so well. It's called, I don't think we've mentioned the name, but it's White Picket Monsters, and we'll make sure to have a link to the Amazon website. But my worry for you was, how could you possibly be everything to everyone? So because you got so many people reading this book who are in need of your help, the words can only do so much. So just talk a little bit about, in terms of the interactions you've had. Has it been overwhelming, or is it manageable? Just talk a little bit about that.
It has been overwhelming on times, Jerry. I have never felt this level of being overwhelmed prior to the book release. I've been contacted by so many different people, and it has been difficult because people do share their stories, and I tend to take things. I'm not one of these people, when you tell me something, it just bounces off. I absorb it. And sometimes my husband tells me to a fault, and it is what it is. I'm a very emotional person, but I've had to take breaks from social media. So, and I felt bad because I know there's messages, there's the notifications. I can't read them all. So, it's just, if you were to every single day I get messages, and not just from people, a lot of strangers, but not just from people in Newfoundland. Now I'm getting messages from people outside the province. One of the messages that I got, well, let me share a couple with you. I had friends who told me that they can't, like Jerry said, can't believe of what has happened, and that it is a difficult story to read. I've had survivors confide their personal, intimate stories. I've had people reach out and tell me that they now, after reading my story, have found the strength to share their story with their family, and that's been truly heartwarming to hear. I've had teachers reach out and say, 2 specific teachers, in fact, come to mind, that they've been in situations where they suspected something was going on with the child in their class or in their school, but they really didn't have any proof and didn't know how to deal with that. But after reading my book, they both have committed to dealing with it differently going forward, and to the point that it doesn't matter if somebody's upset, that if they suspect a child is being hurt or in danger, they're going to do something about that. So that was really powerful. Also, I had one lady reach out to me from the United States, and she told me that from what I understand, and she did a post, and it was on Amazon. And by the way, Amazon is wonderful, but the book, I should mention, is also available local at Chapters in the Coles, and there's stores around town in Bay Roberts and Brigus, Port Basque, all these different stores that are now carrying the book as well, which is wonderful. But this one particular Amazon comment came from a lady who had expressed gratitude for me sharing the story, and talked about how she had taken the book to camp with her to read over the weekend, and she didn't plan on letting her teenage daughters read the book, but decided to let them read it. And when they had read the book, she said that there was a conversation that they engaged in where the daughters talk about how they knew that there was history of abuse, generations of abuse within their family, but they now, after reading my book, are going to ensure that life is different for their children. And how powerful is that? So we did a post on social media because we're just so thankful with that feedback. And we didn't give the lady's name or anything, but when she's seen it, she's been following my Facebook authors page. And when she's seen it, she reached out to me to tell me that it was her. And it's just such an incredible message to know that it's going to help generations of people. Like it's so wonderful.
Bev, you stand in front of an audience, whether they be physicians, whether they police officers, survivors. You tell your story. You're gaining strength in telling your story. You're confident in telling your story. You're empowering those people to make a difference. You're inspiring those people to go on and do better things. You publish White Picket Monsters. You get this feedback, social media and otherwise, of how you're doing the exact same thing on a much broader scale. How does this make you feel? How do you feel about that decision 10 years ago to go down this path now with all of this that's happening around you?
I made the right decision. It feels good to know that it's helping other people. People have often said, and it didn't really hit me until this past week, that, you're stronger now because of what you've endured. And I've thought about that and I said, yeah, maybe I am. But you know what? I didn't need to be stronger. I needed to be protected. And I think about other survivors, we just wanted to be protected. We were children. So, like I said, I've learned so much about the
plan in place. You execute that education plan. You've empowered children to understand, to prevent the abuse. You're solving the problem right now. You're solving it in the moment. How does that make you feel?
I feel really good about it. I was one of those children. I went from kindergarten to grade 12, and I did not disclose to one single person anything that happened in my house. I was warned to not tell, and I didn't. I was that kid. I was so afraid, and I wouldn't speak of anything. But I think about, what if a child is educated, and just to back up for a second, I didn't know these things first of all, I didn't know they were wrong. So, and I've often said, if I didn't know it was wrong, how could I stop it?
Yeah.
But this education that I'm talking about, children are going to be able to stand up. They're going to be able to say no. They're going to know that it's wrong. They're going to, to tell someone. They're going to know that their body is sacred. That nobody should touch them. So, I don't look at what personally. I just look at the big picture, and I know that it's going to help a lot of people.
Well, it's so sorry. Just helping one person is very gratifying. In listening to you talk, I just think about hundreds, if not thousands, of children are going to be protected now because of your work. And I want to say another thing. I've known you a long, long time. You've always been together, but you did years ago have this little shyness to you. That in listening to you talk, that's gone now. Not to say that you're not, you're elegant and eloquent, but there's a real confidence there that you have, and you deserve that voice. You've earned it. Sorry, Alan, I'll cut you off.
No, 100%, Jerry. If you use the term children will be able to, as if it's in the future, but you've allowed it to happen right now. It's happening in the moment and into the future. That's got to be a wonderful feeling. You close your eyes at night at the end of a day to think that your actions are saving people's lives. that's an amazing way to go to bed at night. And I don't know if you reflect on that often, but maybe sometimes you should and say, holy crap, I've come a long way here. I've done some really good things. You're making a true difference. And so thank you for that. So that's the past, that's the present. What's the future look like for you, Bev? What's on the horizon?
So before I jump ahead, I want to just say, though, I want to comment on what Jerry just said about me gaining this confidence. It has been a journey. And, I'm very blessed. My husband has been an incredible source of support. He's there with me every step of the way. And no matter what, I often joke that my ugliest day, no matter what I'm feeling, he's looking for or trying, he's building me up. And not that, I don't mean that I need someone to constantly be building me up. It's not that. It's just that if I feel low, he, whatever it is, he's there to support me. His family's been absolutely incredible. My sister, I've got people that have helped me along the way. And I do want to say that this is also very important. I often said this to survivors that, as long as these secrets are inside, we're not healing. If you can find one support person, even just one person to talk to and be able to talk, you're releasing it. That toxic is starting to come out, and then the healing begins. So, my husband and my support circle, family and friends, have enabled me to be able to be comfortable with myself. I have my insecurities, and they seem to accept me the way I am. So I think that's worth mentioning. I think all survivors should look for that support person and enable themselves that healing as well.
Bev, Jerry and I are very fortunate to have supportive partners as well in our lives. Tell me about your husband. Tell me about what makes him so supportive.
He's the most patient person I know. I truly feel blessed to have had him. And I really feel that he's enabled me to have this voice. I was well into my adult life when I started to talk about these things. And, he's just so accepting. So that's really good. I mean, he'll drive me crazy some days too, but that's life. That's a partnership.
We all do. That's part of our partnerships.
Right, exactly.
I never drive my wife crazy ever, never.
But he's wonderful. My daughter, who's now an adult, she's also been very supportive, and I have 2 stepchildren. I'm very blessed to have. I met Tom when they were little. They were 2 and 5, and being a step parent, I'll tell you, is not an easy job. But I embraced it, and here they are today. They're adults, and I look back at it, and I don't know where the time's gone, but I feel so blessed to have been in their lives. And one of the challenges that came with my past was being a parent. If you would just imagine, I'm a single parent. The struggles of a young girl taking care of her child. I worked multiple jobs, and as Jerry mentioned, I modeled. I did all these things, and I managed to do well financially. But that wasn't my biggest challenge. My biggest challenge was being a mom. Without a proper role model, I often found myself in situations not knowing what to do with a small child. But I always knew what not to do. And same thing with my stepchildren. And I feel that it's helped me be a good parent.
Wow. That's beautiful. So tell me, what's on the horizon? There's no doubt in my mind you can overcome obstacles. You can make great things happen. So what's in the future for Bev?
So I have a list. Of course, I always have a list. Right now, I am working on a bunch of projects, but the big thing, with the book, I have decided that I wanted to create programs that I'm going to have. I have a website. It's just basically my name, BevMoore-Davis.com. I am working on developing programs to help other survivors. I also am working on a bill proposal. It's great to have these educational programs in our schools, but that doesn't bring a guarantee that 5 years from now, 10 years from now, that they're going to still be there. I would like to think they will be, but there's no guarantee. So I'm in a process, just starting the very early stages of a bill proposal. The support groups I want to continue with, I'd like to see them in every community, but I have a list. I've got things. I hope I'm going to continue supporting survivors, and I'm hoping that the awareness thing will continue. We right now, Newfoundland. I don't know if you know. I think Jerry does. That Newfoundland is the only province in Canada that recognizes April as Child Abuse Prevention Month. That took several years to get to that level and to get that support, but we did it. And just for the record, for anybody who thinks that you can't do things, when I sent out the first letter the first year for this request, it didn't get answered, and then the second year I sent it again and I got an answer, but they wanted me to umbrella underneath another organization, Child Abuse Prevention Month of it. And I thought, no, child abuse prevention is itself needs to be a standalone. So I started reaching out to communities, not only in Newfoundland and Labrador, but right across the country. And we have proclamations being signed as far away as BC, Victoria, BC. And I kept doing it. I kept pushing. And finally, the third year, the provincial government from representatives agreed to meet with me. And at the time, they had decided and told me that they would give me a day or a week for this proclamation, this provincial proclamation. And I said, that's wonderful. Let's get a face-to-face now. And when I went in, I had the statistics all there. I had everything ready. So if they were going to say no, it was not going to be easy for them. And I broke it down. We didn't talk much about statistics, but Newfoundland and Labrador has some of the highest statistics in the country for not only domestic violence, but child abuse. And I do feel that we're a small province with only 500,000 people. We can do this. We can make these changes. So I had the statistics and I broke it down to, the number of cases that were reported every single day in the province of Newfoundland and Labrador. And bearing in mind, 90% of the cases go unreported. So by the time I finished, this lady that I met with said, we're going to do it. We're going to do the proclamation for the month of April. So that was pretty cool. And that was 2016. And every year since, we've had our proclamation signed recognizing Child Abuse Prevention Month.
I have a feeling, Bev, when you pick up the phone to call somebody, they pay attention.
Usually. Well, here's the funny thing. Tom's my husband. He jokes within the family, but also at work with staff, that if you want something done, talk to Bev. If it gets on Bev's list, it's getting done. And good and bad, because I push myself sometimes. Yeah. I work a lot. I'm a little bit of a workaholic, but if it's important, I tend to make sure it gets done.
So on that note, Bev, what do you do for yourself? What is the one thing that you do for Bev that is just for you? What would that be?
Do you know what? I get so much pleasure out of and gratification and everything that I'm doing with this cause. And when I see it move forward, that's wonderful. That builds me up. For self-help, there's a lot of things I like to do. I've been participating in a equine therapy, and I have to tell you that has been pretty incredible. I love animals. I love anything to do with children. So, I love reading. Downtime, which I don't take much of, I have to admit, but I do enjoy it when I do.
Tell me about the equine therapy. Where's that held?
That is, Erin Gallant is the owner. That's over on Indian Mill Line. And she has, I can't tell you the exact number because I don't want to misquote, but she has a fair number of horses, and I now know some of them by name. And they have a program that's stable and safe where survivors of abuse are able to go in, and we spend time with the animal. We spend time, Erin is there facilitating. And as a survivor, you don't even realize what's going on. You don't even realize that you are here and you're connecting with an animal, something as beautiful as a horse. And, you let your guard down. It's been wonderful. Interesting conversation that came from my last meeting, Alan. Erin asked me how I deal with my child abuse, how I've dealt with it. And my response is, I deal very well. I've done very well with it, I think, confidently. But so then she proceeds to ask a bunch of questions. One of them, like, how do you sleep? And I said, no, well, I've never slept well. I wake up every night. Unfortunately, I have trouble sleeping. And then she asked me a couple of other similar questions. And then she circled back to, and you're doing very well with your dealing with it. So, as together as we are, I think we need to realize we can never judge. I can put up my front and a lot of other people will do the same thing. We, for me personally, and I guess I shouldn't speak how other people deal with it, but I've accepted that the abuse happened. It's my past. I can't change it. I can't fix it. I can't undo it. It is what it is. I had to accept it. And I have. And I have to move forward. And I'm in control of my life now. I make the decisions. And sometimes it's a little bit awkward. I feel that inner child will come out and say, I'm allowed to do something that, as a kid, I really was restricted and I wasn't allowed to do. So that's been interesting. Anyway, I could just keep on talking. You guys, I could go on for days.
Okay.
Sorry.
We have the whole internet to talk. It doesn't.
Yeah, that's the good thing about a podcast. We can go on for days if we want to.
Bev,
Al, go ahead.
We often ask our guests to leave the audience with a small piece of advice, something that your journey has allowed you to gain this experience and that you'd like to pass on. What would that be for you?
One thing?
You can as many as you want, but
okay. I would tell people to never judge. You really don't know what somebody else has been through or what they're living through. We need to be kind to everybody because we don't know that. The only limits that we have on ourselves are the ones, let me start that again. The only limits in life are the ones that we place on ourselves. And we often hear that expression, but it's so true. You can do whatever you want to do. And if you're determined, if you're passionate enough about something or you want to make something happen, if that will is there, you're going to make it happen. But I want to leave a piece of advice for survivors. I think it's important that they know, first of all, they're not alone. The abuse was not their fault. Sadly, we have all too often spent a lifetime dealing with the shame and the guilt and everything else that comes along with being a survivor of child abuse when we did not do it. We did not cause it, whether it was a parent, a neighbor, maybe an older sibling that abused us as children. We cannot take the responsibility of that. It is not our fault. There is no shame on the survivor. They need to know that. And, if they could find that one person within their support system to speak with, let the healing begin, because as long as it's, trapped inside, the healing can't begin. So that's my advice, I guess.
Well, those are fantastic pieces of advice for sure. Jerry, your final thoughts?
Oh my, I don't know. I just think that there's so much that we've gone through in this conversation that I'm not speechless, never am, but I will tell you this, Bev. You're an entrepreneur, you're a mentor, you're now an author, but I think the proudest thing that you are is a mom. And I think about the success you've had in that area without a role model, without a mentor, is something that you should be so proud of. One last thing I'm going to say is that there's a word that I was taught through my experience with volunteering with the YMCA that is the most powerful word in context that I've ever experienced, and that's the word hope, HOPE. What you bring to the table is more hope than anyone that I've ever seen, and how you done that based on what you lived through still astounds me, despite the fact that I've known you for 30 years, despite the fact we spent an hour talking about this. The courage, the shoulders that you have to not just tell your story to the family, but now you have a best-selling book that you've brought to the world. And man, that takes some courage. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Jerry. That means a lot to me.
Well, another wonderful episode of Gale Force Wins. We started talking about survival, resiliency, and strength, the ability to overcome obstacles and go on to great success. Conversation with Bev today. We have an accomplished author, a mom, a partner, a person that's making a true difference in the world. When Bev rings you, you better pay attention, because she's going to get things done. There's no doubt about that. But right now, in the moment, Bev is saving lives. And not many of our guests, we can say, are doing that in the moment. But you are, Bev. So for that, we thank you. It has been a tremendous conversation to hear your journey, to know where you came from, where you are in the moment, and the list that you have. And I'm sure it's long and will be accomplished. I look forward to reading White Picket Monsters, and I hope others do as well. But I too will leave the audience with my own piece of advice. And quite simply, the world needs more Bev Moore-Davis. So thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to Gale Force Wins. That's Gale Force Wins, WINS.com.